Hi, so sorry it took us so long to get around to making this video. Really, Romans 14, in a nutshell, is it's summed up in verse 22. Hast thou faith, have it to thyself before God. Happy is he that condemneth not himself in that thing which he alloweth. So, all of Romans 14 is basically talking about whatever you do, do it in faith. Now it starts off and it's talking about he, for one, believes that he may eat all things, and another who is weak eateth herbs. So, this is twisted out of context all the time by Christians, and they'll use it to say, well, I'm happy eating pork and I'm happy eating shellfish, and I'm not weak in my faith. I have faith in Jesus has cleansed all foods. And this is just complete blasphemy. This is completely wrong. So God is not the author of confusion. Okay, He specifically told us in Leviticus 11 and Deuteronomy 14 that these foods that are unclean are unclean. They are abominations. Noah knew they were unclean. The unclean went into the ark in twos. The clean went in sevens. Yeshua cast the demons into swine. And then any scripture that Christians will give you to say, see, look, it's unclean food is clean now, is they just twist it and they don't understand what it's saying. Acts 10, Peter's vision, it's about Gentiles being cleansed, not food. And this one the same. So they'll use this and they'll say, well, you just have weak faith because you eat unclean. You eat, what God called clean, and you don't eat what he called unclean. But that's not what it's saying. This is talking about, I believe this is talking about these people who, they get so panicky about what they consume. They think that you've got to have a homestead, and they think that you've got to only eat your own vegetables, and you can't eat supermarket this and supermarket that. And, that is just a lack of faith, because I have faith that, I know all of these foods are sprayed with pesticides and chemicals, and the animals are injected with all sorts of crap. But, I believe that because I do the will of the Father, which is to obey him and fulfill the royal law, that he will preserve me as much as I need to be preserved in order to keep doing what I'm doing. And I just eat whatever God provides for us in faith. I eat what he called clean, and I don't eat what he called unclean. But to somebody who is weak of faith, they're going to, I'm not going to eat that. I'm not going to eat this supermarket meat. I'm not going to eat this supermarket veg. Even though God told us it's clean, it's good for consumption, they just have weak faith in that aspect of it. But, if somebody wants to do that, I'm not going to judge them, because that's what it says not to do. I'm not going to condemn somebody. And likewise, they shouldn't be counting it righteousness for only eating from their homestead, because that's not righteousness. That's just a choice if they want to do that. Who are they to judge me, a servant of God, for eating supermarket meat when I'm actually fulfilling the royal law and, doing the will of the Father? And if we bring this back to when Paul was writing it, these Jews, very likely would have been condemning these repentant Gentiles who would come into the faith. These Jews would have very likely been condemning them, because these Gentiles would have just been eating, they would have been eating what God called clean, but they probably wouldn't have been putting it through all of the rituals and the washings and the cleansings and all these different things, the washing of hands that the Jews would have been doing. They would have just been eating what God called clean and not eating what he called unclean. And Paul's saying, don't let these people judge you for just, eating simply like what God called clean. Yeah, just enjoy it. You don't have to fanny on with all these different things that the Jews were doing. So it's all about just having faith in what you do. Eating in faith. But then it goes on and it talks about verse 5, one man esteems one day above another, and another esteemeth every day alike. Let every man be fully persuaded in his own mind. He that regardeth the day regardeth it unto the Lord, and he that regardeth not the day regardeth it not unto the Lord. Okay, so again, Christians are going to use this piece of scripture to justify themselves breaking the Sabbath. But again, similarly to the thing about food, it's like, look, God has told us already that his Sabbath is a perpetual sign between him and his people forever. It's part of the Holy Covenant. You know, the Holy Covenant is to be kept at all times, anywhere in the world, no matter where you are. You always keep the Holy Covenant. So the Sabbath, you know, you can't just say, well, I don't want to keep the Sabbath, but I'm going to justify it with Romans 14, because it doesn't work like that. Like, if you break the Sabbath, you break the Sabbath. There's no such thing as choosing not to keep the Sabbath but still being right with God. Like, no, you're a covenant breaker if you do that. And Romans 1 is underway because of covenant breakers. What it's actually saying is talking about the feast days. And so, within the instruction of the feasts, you know, Leviticus 23, yes, it tells us that the feasts are forever throughout all our generations. But when you read the full instruction and you read Deuteronomy 12 and 16, it says they are forever in the land of your inheritance. That's the only place you can do those feasts. And so, because we, as lost sheep of the northern kingdom of Israel, are scattered into, the land of our captivity, and we don't have the calendar, we can't do it according to the full instruction, I don't do the feasts unto Jehovah, because I know that he doesn't want me to do them in the land of my captivity. So I'm actually listening to his full instruction. I'm not regarding the day unto the Lord. But, you know, when you take Paul, for example, he would journey back to Jerusalem in order to keep these feasts, and he would regard the day because he could. But we can't in this generation. We literally cannot keep God's feasts holy. We could only profane them. So all these people in the Torah movement keeping God's feasts, they're really just profaning them. And so this is what it's talking about. But, you know, like, I have faith in the full instruction of God, and so that's why I don't keep the feasts. And again, this chapter is all about whatever you do it in faith. You know, there's that scripture somewhere, it's probably in this chapter, where it says, you know, like, he who does anything and doesn't do it in faith is in sin. You know, because everything that we do to and for God has to be done in faith. But it's not just in superstition, it's in faith of the word, in faith of the instruction. So yeah, I hope that helps you understand Romans 14 a little bit more. If you have any more questions, feel free to ask. And I apologize again, it took us so long to get around to making this video, but yeah, hopefully it